All right, welcome everybody. We're going to go ahead and get started. Thank you for joining us today for Buckeye Wellness's November Lunch and Learn. Before we get to our presentation, I just want to highlight a couple of our upcoming events. Our next Lunch and Learn will be Friday, December 11th, and it will be on positive psychology. You can find more information on that and register on Y4H or Link to Health. The Staying Calm and Well webinar series is back for a part 3, and that will be starting Wednesday, December 2nd, and it will go for 3 weeks, and then we'll take a break for the holidays and come back on January 13th for 3 more weeks to finish it up. And as always, our virtual fitness classes are continuing. They are Monday through Fridays, and you can find information for those and register on Link to Health. During the presentation today, if you have any questions, you can type them into the chat box and we'll get to them at the end. And now for our speaker today. Our presenter is Darren Larson. Darren Larson is a mindfulness coach who helps people exercise their ability to recharge, self-regulate, and connect. He uses what people already know about physical fitness to help them navigate the challenges of mindfulness practice, an idea he explored in his TED Columbus talk titled, "Don't Try to Be Mindful." Darren has worked as a mental health case manager, child abuse investigator, business development researcher, and academic instructional librarian. He has been practicing mindfulness daily since October 2002, participates in intensive mindfulness retreats annually, and contributed brain scans as an adept mediator for neuroscience research studies at the University of Vermont and Harvard Medical School. Everyone, please join me in welcoming Darren Larson.
So thanks, Nicole, and just getting my slides up. Thanks for your interest, everybody. It's great to be hanging out with you, at least virtually, so welcome over to my house. I'm excited to talk about my approach with mindfulness too. I think the time is really great because we find ourselves in such a time of great uncertainty. And my approach to mindfulness is about demystifying it, emphasizing how practical it can be, and actually expanding what we think of mindfulness as a way of helping it be something that is doable immediately if we kind of understand what we're trying to do. Also challenging in that we can get better at it with practice. And the reason why it's worth exploring is because when we pay attention to our own attentional habits, when we start to cultivate deciding where to put our attention and how we're relating to what's happening moment by moment, it can be really liberating, and not in some abstract way. We talk about be in the present, be in the moment, but the idea of it being something really usable and practical that helps you feel equipped to navigate the messiness of regular everyday life and of things like a pandemic and like the upcoming holiday season. So mindfulness has its roots in contemplative tradition. I don't approach it as any one specific tradition. So I don't consider myself a Buddhist. I'm not even a vegetarian. I'm really interested in the various ways people throughout history keep coming up with ways to pay attention, to learn how to concentrate, to learn how to regulate their emotions, to get a different perspective than this limited perspective that we tend to default to. And I think that there's something about all of the world's wisdom traditions that they have at least some part of their exploration committed to people pulling away from their routine to go to some kind of a contemplative, simplified, minimalist experience, a monastic experience, where they're actually increasing the structure and the constraints so that they can bring their full attention to what they're doing. So the way I look at this is, we're not trying to explore these things to get away from real life. We might sometimes go away into a different kind of situation so that we can return better equipped for the challenges of life. So we don't go to a Zen monastery to learn how to get really good at raking rocks. We're raking rocks as a spiritual discipline, as a way of changing how we relate to uncertainty, boredom, discomfort. I think a lot of times in life, we have this illusion that we're in control. And there's something about realizing that that is an illusion, and what are we going to do about it? And the thing is, whether you decide to go to a monastery or take up a spiritual discipline or not, eventually the challenge, the thing that the monastery has to teach us, it's going to come to us. It's going to come to us. It's already come to us right now. I think about what we're living through right now is kind of this monastic experience that we didn't sign up for, where we are confronted every day with, what are you going to do? How are you going to respond to not being in control? I think the reality is we're really never as in control as we kind of hope we are, or think we are, assume we are. But what's it like to come to terms with our own vulnerability? And how can we, instead of, I think we're all joking about how, maybe joking, not so much joking, about how this year, 2020, is something people want to get behind us and it doesn't count. We want to do over something like this, kind of joking about how we want to be done with it. I have a little bit different take. I get it. I'll joke along. I get it. I get it. But at the same time, I want this year to count. I want to use this year. I don't want to say that my life was everything except 2020, right? I think none of us really want that. What if instead we stay alert to the possibility of letting the challenge of this year, which seems to be proceeding, right? No end in sight. What if we allow that to transform us in small and big ways, to better equip us to be prepared for life's inevitable challenges? Kind of admitting that maybe this isn't our last pandemic. This certainly isn't our last grief. It's certainly not our last attempt to face things that are outside our control. What if we use at least some of this time to exercise our attention, to decide what to pay attention to? And what I'd like to propose is that we use the challenge of these next coming weeks to get better, or to get prepared for being more mindful in the coming new year. The way I'm going to try to set this up is to try to convince you that you're already mindful, and that you can also practice being more present in the future. Mindfulness really is a way of being more present, right? So what about practicing so that we can be more present in the future? And I have a challenge, or a dare, I'd like to propose about how to turn some of these challenging opportunities into growth. So let's start with you're already mindful. And I hope this can be an interactive session. We're going to give this a whirl. There's quite a few of you. So you're welcome to unmute yourself to weigh in. You can also use the chat box, and I'm happy to read what you write in the chat box. But think about a time, could be recently, could be in the distant past, when you felt like you weren't present. And what I'm interested in hearing about, we don't have to tell the details of what happened necessarily, but what do you remember? What were the clues that you realized something was off? How do you know when you're not present? Is a really interesting question to start asking ourselves. How did things turn out? So I'm hoping that somebody will be willing to at least weigh in a little bit about what comes to mind. Now, this could be a phrase, a sentence, a real short thing. You don't have to go into great detail, but how do you know when you're not present? And I'm going to look to the chat box for some ideas. Good, they're coming in, it looks like. So this morning, oh, I love a fresh one. Thank you. This morning I had to drop off the dogs. We got so many coming in and at the kennel, and I was completely forgot to wear my mask. Oh my gosh, relatable. I've done this more than once recently, haven't we all? I hope. Embarrassed afterwards and a little distracted. Brain was playing tennis when someone was saying to me something. So not really able to hear what someone was saying because you were thinking about someone else, or a little brain fog, it sounded like. when we're multitasking in parenting, I notice I'm not present. I'm planning on the next thing. This is huge. Parenting is like another monastery. That is kind of, we don't realize the opportunities to pay attention to how we're relating to what's happening right now, right? Until we're in the thick of parenting. Reading a couple sentences and realizing you didn't grasp what the words were saying, totally. Couldn't remember what was happening, no details, nothing. So you kind of blanked out, you missed what had happened. Driving home, realizing, kind of not noticing the ride, but noticing you suddenly were home, right? That's a common one. You know, the driving one is a common one we talk about because it illustrates how we have mastered certain things and they become autopilot. And I actually personally love autopilot. I don't want to have to think about driving every time I drive. The danger of autopilot is never deciding to go off autopilot. And this is really a large part of what mindfulness is about. So there's more here. I'm going to just kind of pick from a couple. Realizing you were doing a poor job on something, distracted, went to the wrong store. Yeah, exactly. Okay, so it sounds like we have a kind of a sense of what's it like to not be present. What about what's it like to be present? How do you track this? What do you remember about a time recently or in the distant past where you were really there, in contrast to this not being there? What was different about it? And were you able to savor that observation that you were really present? Feeling calm, someone says, grounded, at peace in the present. You feel connected. And as you guys are weighing, please keep these coming. As you're saying these things, what we're listening for too is the idea of how it's so human to be present. And yet when we talk about it, it can sound so abstract. I enjoy work more. I enjoy my family more. Seeing the details of a flower or other aspect of nature, feeling or being in the right place, doing the right thing at the right time, can immediately grasp a situation, conversation, respond immediately with trenchant and relevant comments. These are awesome. Really feeling the music. Oh my gosh, I want to have conversations with each of you to draw out some more of these details, but we're all on the right track here. On a walk, I remember smelling the wood smoke, hearing sounds in nature I don't typically notice, paying attention when eating, really smelling and tasting every morsel. I'm actually more productive when I'm more focused and present, personally and professionally. So one of the things I want to draw your eye and ear to is how, and the more we give examples, the more specifics that people share, you start to get a clue, a real significant clue about what we're talking about when we're talking about being present. And it has to do with sensory details, right? There is some of this that people are saying they get more done, they feel more in control, they feel more professional. I would say maybe we have fewer regrets, we're more proud of how things played out. And also though, the actual in the moment starts to sound, the field notes start to sound very sensory. I saw that flower closely. I really tasted every bite, or I tasted a few bites would count in my world. I'm not going for 100% laser-like Superman monk level. I'm going for, can I sometimes really pay close attention to a detail here and there? Right? So one of the things I kind of use as a clue when I'm talking about mindfulness or listening to other people talk about mindfulness is I've got my attention tuned into these details where instead of telling a story about I'm a character who has this challenge and I'm trying to accomplish something, when we're in a more mindful awareness mode, it starts to sound more like poetry. There doesn't have to be a specific outcome. I felt embarrassed. My face was hot. My stomach was tight. I was excited. I could hear a sound coming off from a distance, and I thought it might be music. Someone performing. That we've had recently when it was warmer. Some young kids out practicing the cello and having cello lessons out in the topiary park. And when we start to report on these sensory observations, to me, it starts to sound like poetry. And that's a clue. So we want to get away from this, I do at least, want to get away from this really narrow, almost cliche version of what mindfulness is in the popular conversation, where it's this person who maybe has to move to California and sit in an official yoga pose, has somewhere along the way gets really flexible hips, um, um, maybe even requires the ocean or incense or a cat to be mindful, right? Um, what I'm talking about is bigger than this. It's more human than this. This is one way to practice mindfulness in a formal way. It's got a huge tradition, and I actually practice it this way as well. But this is just a part of the puzzle. I'm not practicing when I do formal meditation practice. I'm not doing that to get good at sitting still in a quiet room. I'm actually, to me, this is like a gym where I'm developing attentional skills that equip me to respond to things in my life more with a little more skill, a little more intention, right? So to me, mindfulness can look like this. It can be, I guess, let's say this illustration I designed when the idea we could all be unmasked and all around surrounded by a bunch of people, but you get what I'm going for here, is that I can be sitting still in public with my eyes open, or I could be walking, I could be whatever it is, but I'm tuning into some sensory detail. Because mindfulness is ultimately, it is about being present, but it's this ability that you already have to be aware of what's happening right now with some degree of composure, right? So in contrast to composure, we often find ourselves, if something is going really well, we can get in there and kind of micromanage it. We want to make it better. Sometimes we accidentally choke the life out of it. I don't know if you've ever done this, like on a vacation. Oh my gosh, it's a beautiful sunset. But if it was 10 degrees warmer, that would be really great. Or I wish my hotel room had a better view of the ocean so I could enjoy it from there as well. Or I wish we had planned on a little longer vacation, that kind of thing. We have a way of undercutting the present by start getting in there and trying to make pleasant things even better. And the one I think that draws more people to mindfulness is we fight with ourselves internally when something is unpleasant. We put all our attentional resources into solving, and it can kind of throw us off. Kind of our composure gets thrown. I was listening to Maria Konnikova, who's written a book about poker recently. And poker players have this term called tilt, or on tilt, where their emotions are so strong and it's throwing them off their game. So what I hear there is she's starting to lose her composure. She's less present because she's panicking and making bad decisions, making bad bets. So you already have the capacity to be mindful. Let's just test this out. See if it's possible for you to bring your attention to the sensations of your feet. They don't have to be relaxed. They might be itchy or cold, but just feel the sensations of your feet for somewhere 2, 3, 4 seconds. One repetition of mindful awareness has 2 parts: deciding what to notice and noticing it closely without trying to change it for a handful of seconds. That's probably like one of the most important things you could take away from this is whenever we pay attention mindfully, it's just aiming our attention on purpose and then trying to rest it there for very briefly. And if we're doing formal practice, we're just collecting a bunch of those repetitions together. But notice if there's a sound in your environment that maybe has been in the background, and give it your full attention, or 75% of your attention, for 3 or 4 seconds. And notice if there's any sensation in your body that is uncomfortable, and just feel that discomfort. It could be physical or emotional. Is there anything by contrast that is relaxed somewhere in your body? What's it like to savor for a few seconds the relaxation that you found? Or even neutrality. What's it feel like, the touch of your clothing, like your sweater or shirt on your arm right now? feeling the touch of the fabric on your skin. It's kind of a neutral but pleasant, maybe. And noticing the temperature where you are. And is it possible to notice the quality of the light in the room? Can you see how much light is coming in? Are you aware of being hungry or full or energetic or fatigued, tired? So this is what mindfulness consists of. Getting a little sensory data, real-time sensory data, putting your attention on purpose to something that's happening right now. So this is why I say we all have a base level ability to be mindful. It's just part of being human. It's so simple and natural and ordinary that it's kind of hard to talk about and describe. It's easy to miss. The thing though is we can practice becoming more mindful. We can exercise our attention. And one of the ways that this works is that we start to be able to have that composure, letting things be as they are for a few seconds, for a minute, starts to prepare us to be able to handle a variety of circumstances. So the present might be neutral, the present might be pleasant, or it could be really challenging and difficult. And the more we exercise our attention with mindfulness, we start to expand the scope of the types of circumstances we're able to have some composure within. And what I'm talking about is so easy, a child can do it. We did this as children. We noticed our sensory experiences for no other reason than they were interesting. That feeling the sun on your face or hearing the sound of the fan, getting up close to it and wiggling your ears, feeling your body. What's it feel like to be sick? What's it feel like to swing in a swing? So children can do it, but adults, we have to practice. We get out of the habit. It takes a little bit of effort to come back to what we knew as children, partly because I feel like it doesn't always seem like there's a value, an obvious immediate value in it. And hopefully I'll convince you, at least throw some sparks to the possibility that there could be value in this so that we can just dive in and do it. And saying that children can do it, yes, it's true, children can do it, but imagine if children were taught exercises and developed skills so that they could do it more with a variety of things, and that they were encouraged to stay curious about their sensations, their sensory experiences, what it's like to see and hear and feel, what it's like to have emotions, and to be able to practice regulating their emotions. Children have the advantage of, they have all this neuroplasticity working. We still have neuroplasticity as adults. Even as the older we get, we still retain it, but they have so much of it. And imagine being able to lay down some neurons to really support a life of self-awareness. So another thing, even if we go back before childhood, I love this idea that comes from William James, like a late 19th century psychologist that considered the founder of psychology, studying psychology in universities. He described infancy as a time of blooming, buzzing confusion. And what I hear there in that description is that there was a time even before childhood where it's just pure sensation, sights and sounds and body sensations, and we have no way to make sense of any of it. We don't have any way to have a coherent, analytical understanding of what's happening at all. We're kind of at the mercy of our caregivers to teach us how to make sense of the world. It reminds me of this thing that's, I don't know, I saw this in a window walking around downtown one year, and I love this idea. I don't know if it's, anyway, this idea that some point in childhood you believe, remember you believed in Santa Claus maybe? Then there came a time where you stopped believing in Santa Claus. Then at some point you realized you were in the role of Santa Claus, and maybe one day if it hasn't happened yet, maybe it's coming for us all. You look in the mirror and you realize you kind of resemble Santa Claus or Mrs. Claus. There's something similar here. This fact that we have this lifespan that we're inhabiting, right? So we've got this infancy where it's pure sensation and we're learning how to navigate it. We're learning how to make sense of the world. And in these circles I'm trying to illustrate is that the lighter purple represents all the sensation that we can see and hear and smell and taste. And then the darker purple is this idea of starting to make sense, starting to understand how the world works, how people work. And we start out all sensation and we start to learn how to make more and more sense. We get an education, we learn, we grow up, we take responsibilities. And at some point, the making sense starts to dominate. And it just becomes a habit where making sense is preferred over sensing directly. If you think about this now as an adult, you wake up in the morning and you become conscious. Becoming conscious means you start making sense. You start planning your day, you start planning your routine, you start solving problems, maybe even rehearsing conversations while you're brushing your teeth. Maybe you don't even notice the shower. Maybe you don't notice the water hitting your body when you're taking a shower because you're thinking about how you're already getting behind and need to hurry and the kids aren't getting ready yet. Or now it's different with being trapped more at home, and that you've got other challenges and try to navigate. Is the Wi-Fi working for everybody, or do we know how to navigate this day? And this can start to feel like a trap, right? I see some chat questions. Let me just see. The cyclical nature is evident when you start taking care or interacting with elderly parents. Yes, right. It's such a good point. There's the cycle completes too, right? There at infancy, we're all sensation, but we're kind of headed back again full circle to the point where we're going to need care. And somewhere in our adult life, we might realize that there's a time to take care of children or even our older parents or caregivers. Someone says it's easier to be mindful when someone is walking me through. Do you have recommendations for becoming more? Yes. So Jessica, remind me if I don't cover this here in a minute, please jog my memory again, because that's something I intend to leave everybody with some ideas of how to practice. All right. So this idea of making sense, we wake up, we make sense. In the background, all throughout the day, there's sights, there's sounds around us, there's sensations in our body. And a lot of that, I always say we're swimming in sensation. We're swimming in as much sensation as there was in childhood, but we really understand the world now. We're certain, we know, we're good problem solvers, which, I'm glad I can solve problems. I'm glad I can make sense of the world. But in some way, it starts to become a trap, because the only time I ever notice a sensation is if it's a problem. It's an indicating some danger. I'm just fascinated by right now how the high level of uncertainty makes us speculate and develop worst case scenarios. And I think sometimes the news should be called, speculation, like group rumination, and just wringing our hands and trying to predict what's going to happen. So really, mindfulness is about saying, you know what, making sense is great, but maybe we've lost something in the sensing itself. And maybe it's possible to sneak out of the trap of making sense, the adult trap of relying 100% on making sense or 90%, and maybe bringing in a little bit of this ability to just sense again for its own sake, just noticing what it's like to be alive through our senses, for the intrinsic satisfaction of value of not missing our lives, tasting our food, seeing what's right in front of our eyes, whether we're driving or walking on a beach or listening to our child tell a story from their day, right? Actually seeing the way the light's changing earlier and earlier. I guess maybe now we're starting to go maybe back in the other direction soon, but noticing the light changing in the morning or in the evening, right? And so the idea of how much sensing do we need to bring back on, I really like to aim low. A lot of people will talk about mindfulness that you need to practice for 20 minutes a day. Sit there in the quiet room, feel your breath for 20 minutes. And I say that that's a recipe for giving up really soon. And instead, I'm trying to say that what if we just remember to notice something directly through our senses more often than never? And even give ourselves years to work up to 1% of a day in total, accumulated maybe in seconds at a time, a minute here or there. 1% of our day where we are really noticing something closely. Now, if I've done my math right, there's about 1,440 minutes in a day. Some of that is spent sleeping. A lot of that we do need to make sense. And a lot of it we use to numb or distract ourselves, feel like we're in control when we're not. So what about the possibility of working long-term project, working towards, can I have 15 minutes of my day where I'm not asleep or fixing, solving, numbing, avoiding, escaping, right? And I do mean this literally. I don't mean start tomorrow clocking 15 minutes. I'm saying start right now, notice a handful of seconds, build it from there and see if you can grow that into 1% of your day actually noticing you're alive. I think it's a really, it's a challenge you would never regret undertaking. I certainly haven't. I feel like it's the rest of my life kind of challenge to see how to keep it on board. Just like with physical fitness, it's hard to do. So let's talk about the how to do it. And I love this idea of not getting so fixated on that anytime we practice that it has to be about relaxation or getting it perfectly. But that in general, we're going in the trend of developing the capacity to be more present in the future. When we exercise our attention, it operates at the level of the direct sensory perceptions, whether that's noticing a breath, a sensation of breathing, or noticing the taste of your food, or watching the light changing, or hearing sound as a car goes by. We work at the level of sensation, and that starts to equip us for in the future, near future, long-term future, to be more present, to be more available, to notice what's happening while it's happening, instead of just waiting for hindsight to give us more insight into what has happened, right? So let's try this. Let's try a couple minutes. Let's see how we're doing on time. Let's try a couple minutes of what's it like to practice paying attention in this way. So for 1 minute, I'd like you to selectively attend to sounds. Don't try to stop thinking, but let your attention be pulled to a sound. Listen for a handful of seconds. Your eyes can be open or closed. At the end of those few seconds, either repeat that sound or see if there's another sound. If there's no sound at all where you are, what's it like to listen to the silence? Okay, good. And then for the next minute, see if you can notice when you're about to breathe out, just a normal exhale. If you want, you can kind of slow it down and let that exhale kind of come out slower. Doesn't matter. You could do it either without changing it or with slowing it down just a bit. Really notice from the beginning to the end of each exhale for 1 minute. Again, don't try to stop thinking. And don't wait for the world to get quiet or the kids to stop making noise from another room. Let the text notification be there in the background. We're really practicing noticing one thing closely for a few seconds at a time, simultaneously letting all the other sensations, perceptions be there in the background, especially the impulse to make sense of the world. It's going to be there. See if you can practice letting it be there in the background. And then for 1 minute following along, I'm going to suggest some places to notice. Notice your feet for a few seconds. Your face, the sensations of your forehead, cheeks, jaw, mouth, tongue. Notice what it's like to breathe. Notice the pressure of your body making contact with whatever you're sitting on or lying down on. Noticing the hands. Noticing the whole body. Noticing if there's some emotion you feel in the body, pleasant or unpleasant. Noticing something uncomfortable, ache or itch or cold, without trying to change it. And then for the next minute, play that same game, but you be in charge. Selective attention to body sensations. Pick something small or a body part or a region of the body. Notice it closely and either repeat or move on to another sensation. Your eyes can be opened or closed. Okay, excellent. So that's a taste of how I think of like what's it feel like for 1 minute to selectively attend to one category of sensation at a time. Did anyone find that challenging or easy, relaxing, agitating, interesting, boring? If you could in the chat box let's get a weigh in a little bit about how that's going. Because this to me is where it starts to get interesting, where we're actually exercising our attention. So someone found it relaxing and interesting, soothing. Did anybody find it challenging? There's usually a variety of responses. It can be very relaxing and it can be agitating, actually. I find that one of the things that throws people off about mindfulness is that sometimes we expect the exercises to always feel like the outcomes we're hoping for. I'm glad to hear that so much of this is relaxing today, though. But if you find that you try this exercise later or on your own, and it's not relaxing, that's not necessarily evidence you're doing it wrong, because we're exercising. I compare it to physical exercise. If I'm doing physical exercise right, let's say I'm doing 3 sets of 10 push-ups. The first 5, I feel really strong. Hey, I'm getting stronger. And then I start to feel fatigued. And then I don't even maybe want to do the 3rd set. Or the same thing, holding a plank posture for a minute. Towards the end, I'm like, how long is a minute? My God, right? So it's not that I suddenly have abs of steel. It's that I say, oh, if I want my core muscles to get stronger, there's a degree of discomfort that's part of this game. Someone says that the exercise was challenging to turn off everything. And yeah, and this is such a subtle and important thing, is that we can't wait for everything to turn off. We can't wait for our minds to turn off or our kids to be quiet or people to stop driving by, right? It's really, I think this is one of the least understood aspects of mindfulness. It's that at any given moment, we pay attention to what we've decided to notice, and that could be challenging, while simultaneously letting other things be in the background. The impulse to make sense doesn't like to be in the background. This is what makes that hard. Yes, so there are real life examples of us already doing this, though. It doesn't have to be something that seems so unusual. Like, let's say talking to a friend at a restaurant or over the phone. Each has its own challenges, but let's say you're talking to your friend on the phone, your attention gets pulled away, thinking about how you might respond, listening to other conversations at other tables, that kind of thing. Checking the time like I'm doing right now, just to make sure I'm on target. So what happens when we realize our attention has wandered away from our friend talking, we bring it back to the sound of their voice, listening, catching back up, paying attention. Before I decide how to respond, I should listen. And we can do this on the phone as well. We can get pulled to other things and kind of hope that people don't realize our attention has wandered. Isn't it amazing, though? I think how you can notice when someone else is listening or not listening, even though there's no other clue, there's no evidence. Maybe they're checking their email or doing something else, but you kind of have this felt sense of not really having their attention. So this idea of part of mindfulness is sort of accepting this as much as we accept physical exercise has its challenges, right? It has its inevitable discomforts. To develop a capacity means to challenge something. So we can't expect mindfulness practice to always feel deeply relaxed with our minds quiet and the environment ideal and supportive of this. It's actually more powerful to start thinking, oh, the fact that it's doable and yet challenging is actually something that I can see this is going to change my base level of ability to be mindful in a variety of situations. So this is not just also mystical stuff here. We're talking about neuroscience, collecting a lot of evidence saying that something's actually happening in the brain. There's a difference between the default mode network of the brain actively making sense and analyzing the world, and there's something different that happens when we're paying close attention to a sensation. So Anderson Cooper was on 60 Minutes a few years back, talking to Judd Brewer, who at the time was at Yale doing research. He's now at Brown University School of Public Health as the director of mindfulness research. But they were looking at this way of getting real-time data to help a mindfulness practitioner be able to make a distinction between making sense and sensing directly. And that they found that in pretty quick time, they could teach someone the difference between thinking about feeling your breath and actually literally feeling your breath, because the brain was giving clues about that default mode, temporarily dampening a bit. So the attentional resources were going to sensing the world directly. So Nicole, if you're still tracking here, I'd like to put that poll up if you get a chance. So I want to talk a little bit about this idea. There's a researcher, Ellen Langer at Harvard, who talks about, she's been studying mindfulness for like 40 plus years. And she doesn't even really look at meditation. She says meditation is this practice for being mindful later, which is, I love this, I steal this, I use this all the time. This idea that if I decide to do some timed practice, it's really in the service of being able to be more mindful when I'm not meditating. So let's see what people are using as far as some of these tools. And I think I've left off a couple things, like Fitbit is one I always forget to put on this list. So maybe you use your Fitbit to do a little bit of timed practice. And I'll give it a few more seconds and I'll kind of speak to some of these tools. Oh, you guys are still weighing in. I'll stay out of your hair. So the idea is for me to realize you have pausing to notice a sensation puts you in the present. So that's the most important thing. And if you want to strengthen this capacity, you have the option for doing timed practice, but you don't have to say you're not mindful or you're not working on your mindfulness just because you're not doing some kind of daily formal meditation practice. That's at least how I approach it. So let's see what we've got. We've got a lot of calm people. So we've got some calm and some headspace. I'll say a couple real quickly down this list, and I've got some details and links on the handout for this presentation. that's coming. So 10% Happier is from Dan Harris. The emphasis there is real life application, which I'm a big fan of. And his podcast is great as well for the same reason. Bright Mind app is less well known, but it has a multi-sensory approach to practice. Calm is really big. Calm and Headspace are the big players in the marketplace. Headspace being the one kind of first to market. But they're going to have a series of 10-minute exercises to help you develop some of the skills we're talking about here today. Liberate is one that is designed and created by and for people of color, which deserves a wider audience, that we spread the word about that. Smiling Mind is mostly for kids. It's an Australian tool. Some of these tools are starting to include guided exercise for kids, like Headspace is, I know for sure, and I think they probably all will be. Someone else mentioned the WHILE, WHIL programs. That's another one that is good. I hear lots of good things when I'm coaching people from Ohio State that will tell me about what they've learned of value from the WHILE program. Waking Up is another one that deserves attention. It's the Sam Harris app. To me, that's one of my favorites right now. It's just he does a really outstanding job of introduction, lots of related conversations in that app. I'm actually on the Insight Timer. You can look for me. I'm also on the Bright Mind app as well. And the way I would say, back to the question I got a minute ago, how to work on more of a self-guided. This is something that they're never going to tell you from the apps themselves. But this is my approach to that. And I learned back using cassette tapes. So what I like to encourage people to do is, if you find an exercise or two that you like, use those over and over, use Headspace over and over, but every once in a while, do it on your own. Try to remember the exercise and try it. So it's kind of like I guess training wheels. I don't mean to sound remedial. I think it's just how it works. You listen to it, you're guided through it. Do it again, do it again, do it again, try it on your own. You realize, oh, this is harder. Yeah, it's harder. And then go back to listening again and sort of starting to wean yourself off the need for that guidance. One way to also do that would be, if the guidance lasts 10 or 15 minutes, try it on your own for 5 minutes. So whatever it takes, I would say leaning away from relying 100% on the apps, but most of the apps also have, like Insight Timer has a way to just go in and put in a timer yourself. So you could start sneaking in a bit of shorter self-guided practice. I hope that helps address the question that someone asked a minute ago. Let's see here. Would love to have access to the full WHILE library. That sounds like something the wellness people can help with, maybe, or address. Yeah, okay, so that's beyond my scope. So why would I want to pay attention in the moment, or to strengthen this ability to pay attention? Here's one way to think about it, is we've been talking a little bit about this tendency for things to be on autopilot or just automatic. Even our mode of attention is in making sense. But there's the power of mindfulness to start to observe how we react automatically to a variety of stimulus throughout the day, right? And to start to get better at mining that space between the stimulus and our reaction, to notice before we respond so that we can decide consciously. One of the things, the most powerful things about mindfulness is that it can start to reveal that you're not trapped with just one reaction that you're stuck defaulting to, but that you can choose from a couple options at least. It reminds me of this idea from Viktor Frankl that between the stimulus and response, there's a space. Have you heard this? And in that space lies our freedom and our power to choose our response. And in our response lies our growth, our potential for growth and well-being and happiness. So I think that when we're pausing to notice a sound or a sensation or an emotion, we're really setting the stage for being able to decide how to respond to life. And just with physical fitness, it doesn't matter how often you practice. It matters that you're finding some way to practice at all. So that could be just getting more steps or joining a gym or signing up for some kind of training. The same kind of thing goes with what I call attentional fitness. Mindfulness is a way to exercise your attention. That can be through pauses throughout the day, and you can strengthen that with timed practice, and you can increase the challenge level as you go. It's all part of becoming, having more robust attentional fitness. So I say that mindfulness develops attentional fitness because how we habitually notice sensations strengthens our ability to be aware of the present with composure. Okay, so now let's get into the holidays. So here's your mission. And here's your holiday mission if you choose to accept it. I'm operating from the assumption that in order to grow, we need to have a combination of stress and rest, right? If we have just stress and no rest, it's just all stress, we have burnout. But sometimes the situation is that the rest is not obvious or external. It's not going to just happen. We're going to have to put some effort into sneaking some rest in, maybe some bigger periods of rest. I mean, hopefully we're getting some sleep, at least some sleep, right? So we're getting some rest, but maybe sneaking in some rest along the way. So between now and the middle of January, what about sneaking some mindful awareness in without anyone noticing that you're doing it? This is a really powerful way. Without anybody noticing you're doing it, anything we've done so far, hearing sounds, feeling a sensation in your body will count for this. Tasting your food, anything sensory. And also doing it without anyone noticing, but also without waiting for circumstances to change or improve. So we're not waiting for things to resolve in the world. We're trying to decide how to engage or disengage from this impulse to make sense. So Annie Lamott in this great TED Talk says, almost everything will work again if you unplug it for a few minutes, including you, right? Easier said than done though, right? But I think at the heart of this is not just being able to step aside and rest officially, but taking a break from making sense, even for a few seconds, even for a half a minute, 2 minutes, 5 minutes, is a way to disengage that default mode network and to sneak a little bit of rest. It's almost like lubricating the engine so that you don't get to the end of the day and realize that you've been building up this friction all throughout the day by constantly problem solving and thinking and planning and resolving, right? So how we do this is simply by pausing to notice sensory details without trying to change them more often than never. And Ellen Langer, the Harvard researcher I was mentioning, talked about meditation just helps us to build the capacity for being more present in the future. And she says, supporting this idea that whenever you notice something new, you are in the present. This takes it away from abstraction. Whenever you see or hear or feel anything closely, you are in the present. All your senses count. And I would even throw in here the possibility of your perception of noticing that your mind is all over the board, is a kind of noticing the perception of my attention is really anchored in my mind. I'm going from one place to another. That counts as mindfulness practice as well. To notice, is my mind active or scattered? Not to judge that, but to just be aware of, in this moment, my mind is hopping all over the place, usually because I'm trying to solve a problem, something, right? Or we can notice our emotional reactions. What does it literally feel like emotionally in this moment? So coming up with the holidays, we've got a couple categories, broadly speaking, of ways to apply this. And we can sort of anticipate these things. Some of the things coming up are things we enjoy, right? Maybe the sweaters and the blankets and the fire in the fireplace, the music, the hot chocolate, the food. Being able to start to think about how you're going to leverage your mindfulness to sneak a bit of mindfulness in as you're preparing a meal, as you're enjoying a quiet moment that you can find, as a song comes on the radio that you enjoy, and actually not just leaving that in the background, but kind of bringing a few seconds or minutes of actually savoring that. So my suggestion is to start to make a list. This is a secret list because you're a spy on a mission that no one knows what you're doing. make a list. Let that list start to grow. And the list of things that you find nourishing, rejuvenating, relaxing, and think about what are the sensory components there. Is there a sound component? Is there a relaxation component? Is there a particular movie I enjoy watching this time of year that gets an emotional response? Can I notice that emotional response when I feel it, right? So the idea is to start to anticipate what are some of the things that you're looking forward to, and to plan to really savor those privately. It's an inside challenge to try to do this. And really shooting for between now and mid-January, just shoot for more than never. More than never is outstanding. The power of the trance of making sense constantly is really strong. It's really hard to break. But if you start to be on the lookout ahead of time for these opportunities, you'll be surprised how you'll remember to do them more if you are kind of on the lookout for them. So then we have the other category of experience coming up, which is the stuff that is provocative or triggering, that are difficult. And instead of trying to solve all of them, it's not like we suddenly become passive, but at least some of the time starting to relate to those unpleasant sensations as if they were inevitable parts of life, basically because they are an inevitable part of life. So maybe your Thanksgiving meal is not going to have all the people physically present with you this year, that kind of thing. So noticing what does that actually feel like? When that is playing out, trying to stay curious and open and notice, can I respond to this challenge creatively? And can I also feel the related conflicting feelings I'm having, where it's not exactly how I would like it, but maybe I can also mine this thing for what matters most, get creative, get personal. I think we're going to all surprise ourselves, actually. These challenges might lead to some kind of memories that it's hard to predict how they'll play out. Maybe there'll be some really meaningful things. When it comes to unpleasant situations, one of the things I think it's easy to miss is just noticing the emotional reaction in real time. Not the why am I feeling this? How do I not feel this? But where am I feeling it? Am I feeling it in my body, my face, my stomach, all over? Would I call it? Does it have a name? Is there a flavor? Is it more than one flavor? How strong is what I'm feeling? So it's sort of like not just waiting till later to explain your Thanksgiving to someone, for example, but to actually take a little data sample. What's it actually feel like right now when I'm in the thick of it? This is a surprisingly powerful way to start paying curious attention to your emotional response as you're having them. I wanted to share a story about a nurse working in the ICU. And actually, she's at Ohio State, and she was someone I was coaching, and she gave me permission to share this story. She just started in the ICU in January and loves it. And she's a good, competent nurse, but she was finding that she felt like, even though she was able to do her job well, she could feel inside that she was headed towards burning out. So I suggested a couple things after talking to her. She did two things. One is she started to build in 5 minutes at the end of a shift in her car, either before leaving the hospital or before going into her house when she got home. 5 minutes, set a timer, feel what's there to be felt in your body. And you don't have to make a big deal of this. You don't have to try to stop thinking. You might notice physical sensations, relaxation. You might notice emotions, but just give yourself 5 minutes to feel the things maybe that you haven't been willing or able to feel during the day. So that's the timed practice she agreed to do. And then the pausing practice was, as she's going about her job, encountering things that were emotionally difficult, we played with this idea of maintaining composure on the outside, but giving herself permission to feel what she was feeling on the inside, and to explore what's that like to try to do that, to hold those things at the same time, to really be there, professional nurse, composed, but secretly saying, this is what it feels like when there's no more care I can give. This is what it feels like when someone is at the end of their life. This is what it feels like when families aren't able to say goodbye to their loved ones. And she said that within a week or two, she was having an awareness that she was more present at home. And she was realizing this tendency to bottle up emotions that she didn't realize she had a habit of doing. And so she got some relief pretty immediately, felt better equipped to navigate these emotional challenges, and she felt like she wasn't headed for burnout any longer. So I know we're running out of time, and I know people are going to have to pop off. We're going to stay on. I'm going to wrap up because since we're recording, well, at least we'll have this. Someone was saying that the Calm app has sleep stories for adults. Yep. Not aware of Insight Timer until this webinar. It looks like so many, yeah. So Insight Timer, the thing about Insight Timer is it's free. I always keep it on my list because it's free and it's got a robust library. Pick and choose and find your favorites and bookmark them. Someone else had to leave, so thanks for letting me know you had to leave. And I'm almost done here. So the idea with this category is to also make a list and grow that list, keep that list somewhere, and anticipate ahead of time to call off the battle with the unpleasant sensations secretly. And one of the most powerful things that people I work with report finding some relief in is simply narrating briefly whatever they're doing as a way to remind themselves to notice what's happening. This is what it's like for the weather not to be like I want it to be. This is what it feels like when my family can't be together. This is what it feels like to be disappointed. This is what it feels like to have to go to the bathroom. This is what it feels like to walk my dog. Anything you can describe what you're doing right now, and then really just sink into the sensations that are available as you're doing it. When that becomes a habit, I think you'll be surprised how powerful that can be in sort of calling off the battle with what's happening, waiting for a better future to happen, and really inhabiting the moment more fully. Another suggestion, if you're up for this, would be a bonus extra credit points, but to either have a notebook or maybe a spreadsheet that you can pull up and have it really simple. It could be a bullet point or a phrase, just the day's date and one thing you noticed, one sensory thing you noticed closely during the day. And having this can help you sort of remember to disrupt that impulse to make sense all day. As you get going, you start to notice, and this will start to sound like poetry. If you were to read this back to someone, you would start noticing that all these observations are starting to help you recognize the richness in ordinary life that's so easy to miss. And, don't wait around for epiphanies. Focus on the exercise. Don't wait for your body to get better. Just go to the gym, right? If you just yield to the practice of paying close attention more often than never, the insights will come. The things you're going to tell Oprah when she asks you to be on her show, those will come in their own time. We can't rush those. And I feel like sometimes we make ourselves miserable waiting, where's the big insight here? Those big insights will come. I've found that they usually come in difficult moments, in difficult times. So it's sort of like, let's just let them arrive when they get here. And then for those of you who are still stuck around, hanging around, I have two things and that's it. This one is a secret worth waiting for. This idea that at the beginning we talked about noticing the difference between not being present and being present. And here's the magic. Whenever you realize you're not present, you suddenly become present. And this is a liberating insight. So I just gave you an epiphany earlier, if it makes sense. It's this idea of when we catch ourselves not present, then we are present. Sometimes this is learned through, we realize after the fact I wasn't present, but we get closer and closer to realizing I'm not present right now. When we realize that, you are present. Nothing else to do but engage what you're seeing and hearing and feeling and just be there. And one last thing, your current level of mindfulness is enough already. You have enough, you have everything you need to get through these coming months and weeks. Don't forget to reach out for help when some of those things, what I was saying, feeling our feelings in real time. Sometimes that feeling means I need something. I'm sad because I need to feel a connection. I need to make a call. I need to reach out. I need to get some help. Sometimes feeling our feelings instead of numbing them or pushing them away reveals something that we need to ask for. But you're already mindful enough to be present through these coming weeks. I love this phrase from Archilochus, Greek philosopher, that we don't rise to the level of our expectations, we fall to the level of our training. So I would say to you that you already have what you need to be aware of what's happening as it's happening now. And at the same time, you can develop that skill so that in the coming months and years, you can actually have a more robust resilience, a more robust willingness to be vulnerable, to be present for more of your life as you're living it. So let's see if there's any questions, if anyone is still here with us. Got a couple things. And sorry, I didn't, my margin's too thin, didn't have much time for conversation. Just some thank yous and people have to run off. So happy holidays, everybody. And I hope that you found some use here. And if anybody wants to reach out, hey, Aaron, anybody wants to reach out directly, you have 5 sessions with a mindfulness coach through your EAP, and we can talk about anything that you think would be helpful. So, all right. Hope it was interesting, guys.
Great. Thank you so much, Darren. That was wonderful with plenty of takeaways for all of us. For those of you that are still on, you will be receiving an email from me Monday morning that will have information on how to access the recording, as well as an evaluation. You could take a few minutes to fill that out. We really appreciate it. It helps us better our future programs. So once again, Darren, thank you so much for the wonderful presentation, and thank you everyone for joining us, and have a wonderful weekend.